Proponents of the global warming theory say that higher levels of greenhouse gases, especially CO2, are causing world temperatures to rise and that burning fossil fuels is the reason. But scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate. Many scientists agree there's ample time to better understand climate systems and consider policy options. So there's simply no reason to take drastic action now.
My name is Katie Swick, and this is my house on Elm Street that was flooded in July. Come on in. So this is the living room. In order to afford this house on my own salary, as a teacher, I was renting. The upstairs was separate, and me and my daughters were living down here. So this was our living room down here, and yeah, I mean everything was flooded down here. We had to tear out everything in the first floor, but the walls, the insulation, the drywall, the kitchen cabinets, all the appliances, the heating system in the basement, the electric in the basement, hot water heater, just basically everything but the showers I feel like's gone, and the walls of the studs, down to the studs in the whole house. Oh, you can smell it. It smells like mold and damp. Over there, my daughter had another bedroom, which the whole thing was, the floor came up and the bed and everything was just, it was just buckled up. It was all floating.
So this was the high water mark?
Yeah, up to here. The river was in this house. It's just unbelievable to think about a river being in your whole house and moving everything around. When I came back, we canoed up to the front steps. The water was just low enough, just, it was just sopping walking. I had a carpet in here. It was just sopping wet and things just all over the place. And yeah, very strange. I raised my second daughter here and just sat in the chair, nursing, do the mom thing, looking out the window, that blue chair. I know I could see it in the pictures. Like, oh, the blue chair out in the dump pile out front. Yeah. Who wants to deal with losing everything in their house? It's awful. I mean, my kids don't want to move back here. Yeah. But how do I move forward? I'm paying a mortgage, but I can't live here right now. I mean, I don't know.
Wes Hamilton, the co-owners of 3 Paint Tap Room here in Montpelier. We flooded. We took on about 3 feet of water and lost everything. We obviously flooded in July when the rest of the town did. You can even kind of, with everything put back together, see the grime and the muck that just, it will never go away. We're, kind of constantly thinking about when's the next one and how bad's it going to be, and how would we possibly survive that. We, funny enough, are a little proud of this sign. We really feel like it tells such a story about where we came from and what we went through. It feels like we were just a few inches of water away from not only not being back, and the jobs that would be lost, and the thing that we really do, which is bring people together and have a space for the community. But to cry personally, my business partner and I would then be on the hook for our existing debt payments. Been here almost 15 years and have never in that time had more than water in our basement. The reality was just total devastation. We lost essentially everything we owned. The degree of the loss really kind of revealed itself over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 days. We didn't realize that the thing that had to happen was all the walls had to get torn open, whereas initially the flooring kind of looked like, this is kind of dirty and screwed. It wasn't until a couple days later that the whole thing started buckling and just kind of coming apart at the seams. And so then at that point, it was kind of absurdly and impossibly big. Between grants and our insurance, we were going to be short on what we needed to reopen, and then we would be reopening just after the fall busy season, which means we needed to further borrow money in order to have something in savings to make it through this past winter that we've just gone through. I mean, if nothing else changes, then that will be financially ruining, not just for myself and my business partner, but that 30-year loan from the SBA. They're very clear. That's my daughter's. She's going to be paying that back if this restaurant can't pay it back.
My name is Andy Jones. I'm the farm manager at Intervale Community Farm in Burlington. We're one of half a dozen independently owned and operated small farms in Burlington. So July 2023, the entire farm, save about one small section of high ground, was underwater from the flooding that happened. For us, it was July 11th and 12th. And then we got a sort of a repeat of that in late December, around the 19th or 20th. Anything that you see in this particular view was underwater. I would probably have been sitting in maybe chest height water at this point. So this was a lake. You can see this is our distribution shed over here for our summer CSA, which we store equipment in and things in the winter. But this was all completely underwater. All the fields around here were underwater. And so we lost all of the crops in those areas. And you can see over here, along this red board, there's a little silt line. We have a little marker there. That was the water level, July 12th, peak flood last year. The December water level was, I think it was about here, and then Irene was sort of halfway in between, something like that. So those are the big floods over the last 35 years that we've been here. I contacted the forecasters at the Burlington National Weather Service office a few months after Irene, and they said, well, our guess would be that Irene was somewhere between a 50 and a 75-year recurrence interval flood. So it's a little unsettling that it happened 12 years later. And then to have a second one of not quite the magnitude of Irene, but still pretty serious, the third most significant flood that I've seen in 30 plus years in the same calendar year was alarming. After Tropical Storm Irene, I thought after that, boy, I'm really glad I won't have to go through that again. So it was a shock to me. It was a surprise to our neighbor farms and I think people around the state, the magnitude of the damage. We had to wait for things to dry out and replant as much as we could. It was late enough in the season that there were a lot of crops that were just lost at that point. There wasn't enough time on the clock left to replant them, but we did the best we could. I think the financial impacts of widespread crop loss are really devastating to a lot of people. There will be farms, I'm sure, that don't recover. The future is really uncertain. Floods are one of the threats we face for climate change, but there are many others. Crop growth is really different. There's a lot of things that don't grow that well if it's super hot. Irrigation, lack thereof, too much water is a problem, not enough water is a problem, and climate change forecasts that we're going to have both too much water and too little water as we oscillate between extremes. And then, there's novel diseases and pests that are a result of those conditions, but also a result of the ecosystems changing, and heat stress on people working. So all of those things are, going to be realities in the future. How exactly we contend with them, I don't know. I think the big question in the mind of a lot of the staff and of our co-op board is exactly that. How often can this happen? And, what do we do if it starts happening? 12 years later after Irene was much sooner than any of us had envisioned. What happens if it's 6 years or 5 years or 2 years? At some point in that range, our business model becomes no longer viable.
Researchers say that one of the world's biggest oil companies made highly accurate predictions about global warming while publicly dismissing any link between fossil fuels and climate change.
The company was aware of the scope of the problem it faced. But then something shifted in the late 1980s when the public began taking climate change more seriously. That's when Exxon's public posture changed. Exxon started spending tens of millions of dollars to manufacture doubt about climate change. The company financing advertisements designed to look like editorials and fringe research, all meant to question the growing scientific consensus.
Here at home, a pair of U.S. oil companies announced record profits Friday. In the second quarter, ExxonMobil reported nearly $18 billion. Chevron recording over $11.5 billion in profits.
Money, right? It's really, so much is about money. They got enough money and they want to make more money by hiding the truth and hiding information, stopping things. We need lots of mitigation on this river and plan for the town and people here. And, Barrie, all of Vermont, you hear about it all in the news too, right? We're not just the only ones getting 8 inches of rain in one day. That's not normal. Somebody needs to take some blame and put some effort back into stopping it.
Under, the state health code, we're obligated to keep the product at a certain temp and refrigeration. And if we don't, we face fines. We face the potential of being just shut down. And, we face the potential of being, sued by people who've been harmed by our actions. How that would possibly make sense for us to be held to that standard and not, Exxon or BP, no real grown-up would come to that conclusion. You could be a small child and understand that it's pretty straightforward. There's no way for us to respond to a similar event in the way we responded to that last one. There has to be the resources for what sure seems like the inevitable next time it happens. And if the next time isn't here, maybe it's Barrie or maybe it's Woodstock or Hardwick, or, you know, it seems to me that we're past the temporary solutions for the permanent problems.
A lot of the burden is going to fall on society. It's going to fall on taxpayers. There are some large actors who knew decades ago that there were real problems with the burning of fossil fuels, and yet those same businesses have been opposing changes, opposing regulation that would have forestalled some of the worst effects that now we're all just starting to suffer because it's gonna get worse. They're some of the largest companies on the planet making huge profits. They should share in the costs of cleaning up some of the damage that they've done.
Devastating, expensive floods and other disasters linked to climate change have some state lawmakers wanting to hold fossil fuel companies accountable.
The Vermont Climate Superfund Act would be modeled on federal legislation allowing for state officials to recover cleanup costs from those responsible for causing environmental harms. A proposal like this, however, is expected to face stiff opposition from fossil fuel companies.
The resources for all these things, you know, the resources for us to rebuild and reopen without taking on debt exist. The resources to take, you know, flood mitigation efforts down the river or whatever else gets deemed necessary. Those resources all exist. We just happen to live in a nation and in a society that for the past, 45 years has said all those resources belong just in the bank accounts of these handful of individuals, and the larger society is just, there's winners and losers and everybody else is a loser.
You have more impact. You should be doing more to mitigate what your impact is. Yeah, everyday people can do a little bit, but government, big companies, people in charge, they're the ones that can make the big difference. They can really make change. My driving the Prius is so minimal compared to what a big oil companies can do, because we know what they are doing to our climate and our lives. Right? They don't care about us individually, but they need to.